Here we are! Mountain Sheep Landscape Design. It was discovered in Cashiers, North Carolina about 35 years ago. And none of us have ever looked back because we're sustainable. We love native plants. We love the beauty of our nature. We love pollinators. We love the bears. We love each other. And we especially love the new chapter called the Oconee Bell chapter of the North Carolina Native Plant Society. Woo! And you may have guessed, I'm very fond of that group. I'm going to introduce 2 or 3 of the board members to you in just a second. And my name's Mary Palmer Dargan. I'm an infamous landscape architect in these parks. And I happen to write this lovely book that we're going to give away a copy of, so thank you all. We'll do it toward the end of the lecture. See, they're floating to the top. So, then we have lots of goodies for y'all. Thank you for coming today. We have handouts about native plants on the back table outside the tent. The bandstand. We have special merit-based question and answer sessions. There's 3, correct? Arielle McIntyre, garden designer, is showing us a baby red lobelia. And this thing is a cardinal plant, big pollinator. And she's going to give away 3, I believe. Is that right?
Yes.
Merit-based. So get your little cell phone out.
All right.
Be ready to look up an answer. Because we love the fact that we're here. We've tried 3 different ways to project this show to you all. I know we're all adults and we know it doesn't always act like we want it to, but golly darn it, we gave it the old college try. So
we have 1,000 thread count projector screen.
So we went to a nearby hotel and borrowed a sheet. But we do want you to know there's plenty of information, and Nancy Anderson is going to, with the emails also, you don't even have to, we want your emails because we can send you the link to this slideshow since it might be a little hard to see today. But we're going to be amusing, entertaining, and full of information, or full of good. I'm not sure which one we are. That way you'll leave here and be touched, moved, and inspired by native plants and their ability to bring joy to the world. And so without further ado, I'm going to first tell, can you stand up? I can't see you. She's so cute. So and Arielle, come on up here. You all probably saw the adorable picture of the 3 of us that was in the marketing. We went to Chattooga Gardens, right down the street. If you're not from here, how many of y'all been to Chattooga Gardens this week? Well, you've got one more chance. The day's not over yet. But seriously, they loaned us some plants so that we could show some real things. And then they also let us take pictures there. And we love Chattooga Gardens. And there are a number of very good native plant collectors on the plateau. But this one's nearby, so we want to thank them for their help. So Nancy Anderson is you have to tell your name.
I'll introduce myself, but let's hear about Arielle. These are my teachers, and I learned so much from these teachers that I want to do a little promotion for their class toward the end of my talk.
I say Mary Palmer Dargan kicked this all off about 5 years ago. She was delusional, just like me, and we started this wonderful garden design course called the Placemakers Academy. And she's been my mentor for the past 5 years. And Nancy was one of our students with the Placemakers Academy.
And she's a professor emeritus of biology from Purdue. So we're really wow, she's taking our course? This is awesome. Cool. And as a result, we adopted her and she can't get away from us.
And she took up the charge when Mary Palmer said we really need a local chapter of the North Carolina Native Plant Society. Nancy said, I think I can do that. And she's just really taken up the charge. None of this would have been possible without her.
Because we're registered with the North Carolina Native Plant Society website, so you can get info. You can go to other people's hiking trips and go see native plants. So we're your vehicle to get you to those very special things. It also crosses over to South Carolina, Alabama, Georgia, so we're global.
And this particular chapter, our logo, the Oconee Bell, you can see it on the aprons of the volunteers. That logo was made by Jenny Perry. Where's Jenny? Our artist. So nice apron. When these volunteers are finished passing out seeds, they're going to pass the apron to Norbert and PJ and Claire. Okay, so you'll recognize who our volunteers are by the apron. And we're so grateful to have a group of people. Every time we have an event, different people show up. So it's not like we have a core group of people. Here we have these two-lane highways and it's hard to get there and everybody has a busy schedule. But the fact is there are hundreds of people who are interested in native plants here in the Cashiers Village. We define as extending from Brevard to Silva to Franklin. But our special focus, and we're the only chapter in the North Carolina Plant Society that's really focused on high altitudes, 3,000 feet and higher is most of our members. And we have members who actually pay to belong to the society, and that's a good way to support us. We also have participants who just sign up for our email newsletter, which is on the web, and that has no cost at all. And we're so encouraged by the 290 people last count who signed up for that newsletter and are getting some news about events that happen every month. So today,
Let the show begin.
I have doesn't always work. But I'm also Easter Lake Homes, and we've had our home there for about 10 years and then year-round for 4 years. I'm a Transylvania County Master Gardener, so yesterday we were helping people count the pollinators up here, which is a really interesting activity. And I'm a co-chair of the Oconee Bell after. We're actually looking for another co-chair, so if you want to get involved, we really want more people to be involved. But most important, I'm a wife. Trevor's my husband, and he's going to hold up his screen. I'm a mother, I'm a sister, and as a citizen, I'm really interested in making sure that we protect the biological world that's around us. And so, preserving the spirit of mountain gardens. To me, what that means as a biologist, I'm going to give you some of my nerdy language, is thinking about it in terms of eco-gardening. What is eco-gardening? That means we look at plants as a community, where there's competition among the plants, and competition is fine if one plant competes and loses out to another plant, but that's perfectly natural, that's perfectly okay. And succession over time. So the garden you make today is not going to be the garden that you have a year from now, 2 years from now. So thinking of it in those terms and in terms of interdependency between the plants and other living organisms. So I'm going to take this first half hour, talk about what that means in terms of the light and how plants perceive light. And then I'll talk a little bit about how some of the interdependencies and end up with some thoughts about ground covers, which I think is one of our big challenges in this area. And after that, talking about why we're doing this, I'll pass it to Arielle, who's going to talk about how to make it happen. So I have this handout, which I'm not going to read to you, but everything in the PowerPoint is in that handout. And if I send you the slides, you'll see it. But here's really what's in the handout. What does it mean to think about the spirit of our region, the spirit of your garden? What does that mean to you? The feelings you have when you're out in the garden, what you enjoy about it. Everybody wants to create an interesting and enjoyable garden. That's why you're here, I'm sure of that. But if you think about where we are, we have lots of new neighbors coming in. And when the neighbors move in, the people who build the houses often don't put a lot of thought into their landscape. And so they'll plant some shrubs and some things and probably assume that most people like a lawn, so they might make a really big lawn. And you end up with a high maintenance, we're going to call it manicured garden. You have to manicure it. You have to regularly amend the soil, add fertilizer, use pesticide. The runoff ruins the watershed. Bags of bird seed are consumed if you want birds to come in your yard. You have a bird feeder, like how many bushels of bird seed do you buy every winter? And the problem with the low species abundance and the low species diversity is that actually attracts pests. Think about here, you've got this beautiful hosta hedge, and you're, yum, there's my lunch. Pretty soon you have no hostas because the deer saw that that was a rich place to go have a meal and the hostas are gone. So if you have more diversity, you'll actually have predators to the pests and you'll have much lower pest control. And the wildlife lose their habitat. There aren't resources for them to do much foraging. And in my view, if you have a large lawn like that, it's too hot to go outside and do anything in the summer. So when I really think deeply about it, I don't enjoy that large lawn, which might look good from a distance, but it's not very useful. And the alternative people use here, which I found very interesting when I first moved here, is instead of a lawn having mulch with pine straw. Okay, when you put down the pine straw, you have to do that 2 or 3 times a year, right? Well, it helps you see when a weed comes up and you can quickly pull it out, but it's not natural. That's not what you see if you look at a balanced ecosystem. So that's my yard, which you can't see very clearly. But when I think about the spirit of our region, I think about all of the birds, the sound of the birds, the smell of the blossoms, the buzz of the bees. To me, that's the spirit of a mountain garden. So we want to talk a little bit about if you want that kind of spirit of mountain garden, how do you go about doing it? There's some reasons to do it. It's inexpensive, doesn't require all the fertilizers or the pest control. The plants, actually, some of the native plants have very deep roots. They're accustomed to our heavy rainfalls and they hold on to the dirt and keep the dirt in place. And the birds are then fed by the native plants. You don't have to buy your bags of bird seed, although we do buy some bird seed because we have this little bird buddy and we can put a few seed in there and the birds will come up and it snaps a picture of them. So I'm going to show you a few photos of my bird buddy bird. I think the way to do it is have plants that the birds can eat and then just track them up to your house so you can get a picture of them. The native plants and the pollinator diversity, all those pollinators are providing food for the birds and the wildlife, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So the reason ground covers is so important is with eco gardening, you only mulch until the ground cover gets established. And then the ground cover becomes the mulch and protects your soil, and you don't have to do that work anymore. So much less input required for a mountain garden. So to really understand, though, how to put it together, you got to think about light. So it's amazing, isn't it amazing how plants tune into light? This rosy viv, those are the colors you would see in a rainbow. Red, orange, yellow, the warm colors are used by plants for photosynthesis. And the plants can also use the blue, indigo, violet, the cool colors. So those 2 extremes are used for photosynthesis. Plants do not use the green for photosynthesis. So all the green is reflected back, and that's why you see plants. So what's amazing to me is that plants also have light sensors, so they can actually orient themselves in space. They have a blue light sensor, which tells them where the sky is. So the blue light sensor is crucial for helping the plants grow up into the light. They have a red light sensor. You can't see this very well in my picture there, but the blue light is up and the red is off to the side. So in the shadows, you have more red and you have infrared. Plants can feel that, and so that helps plants realize that they're being crowded by neighboring plants. They use that information. It also helps them realize as they progress. And then finally, plants have been on Earth, the flowering plants, since about the time of the dinosaurs. That's about the time that insect diversity came along. And the plants came up with brightly colored flowers. Red flowers tend to attract birds like hummingbirds. Orange flowers attract bugs and bees. And my question was, can you see the pollinator in that orange flower? And I'm sure you can. But there's a bug. That is an orange fringed orchid. We have these growing at our lakeside. They just popped up from the wild. And when I took a picture of it, you look closely and there's a little bug crawling on the flower. So the orange is there to attract the bug, spread the pollen, and help the orchid produce food. Yellow flowers, I'm sure you've seen, are attractive to butterflies and to birds and to bees. But bees especially like blue and violet flowers. So if you think about all the colors of the rainbow, each flower has its pollinator that it's trying to attract. And isn't that amazing how the plants have used light in order to attract pollinators and reproduce more efficiently? Now, white flowers are really cool because white flowers show up at night. I'm going to show you a white flower in a minute and what it's attracting. A point to keep in mind is that manicured lawn, it may only attract the real generalist type of pollinators. Like you find a bumblebee, you probably find a honeybee, but you don't find a whole diversity of specialized pollinators that are looking for different type of flowers in a garden. So here's just another example. Here are the colors of the rainbow, and then there's a bee balm that attracts the hummingbird. This is the Turk's cap lily with a butterfly on it. Here's some St. John's wort, which attracts all sorts of pollinators, especially bumblebees. This picture on the Joe Pye I took right over there. Turn around, you can see the Joe Pye last year. It was just covered with pollinators, bumblebees and other types of pollinators. This is phlox with a butterfly in the phlox. Here we have a rhododendron with bumblebee on it. Now, if you think about those different flowers, you can probably also tune into the season. So the phlox, that's a picture that I took last spring. That's one of the first really bright flowers we get in the garden. And so here's that phlox providing pollen for the early butterflies that are just waking up for the winter, following the winter. Whereas the Turk's cap lily and the bee balm are blooming right now. So you've got to keep in mind the season, not just the colors of the flowers, but the season, and plant flowers so that you have pollinator resources for all seasons. And flowers do this magnificently. First of all, they're not green, so they stand out. And second of all, they have shapes, like they might be tube shaped that allows the bee's tongue to go down into the flower. They often have a strong fragrance or a sweet nectar to feed the pollinators that are coming and keep them coming back. So what to keep in mind from this slide is that the cultivars you buy at a nursery, they may be that species, but they may be selected for a special scent or for a bright color or for something that may not be quite as attractive to the pollinators. So go ahead and buy your beautiful flowers, but keep in mind that in addition to the cultivars, we should be collecting seeds or propagating some of the things that are found here naturally already, so that we're giving food to all of the pollinators. So here I want to talk a little bit about the season. As the earth revolves around the sun, the axis is tilted so that the rotation of the earth changes the orientation of the sun in relationship to us. So in the summer, you have pretty direct sun rays and the shadows are kind of short. And what that means is that all the sunlight is concentrated into a small area. Whereas later in the season, when the sun is more directly over the southern hemisphere, then we're receiving sun rays at more of an angle and the shadows are getting longer. So that's what we're getting this time of year. You might have noticed the shadows. Well, the flowers noticed that. We had a competition in about, I think it was May, and we had members of our chapter submit photographs of wildflowers that they had taken. We had 90 photographs submitted. And here's some beautiful, pink lady slipper orchids, the yellow lady slipper orchid, the bumping laurels. Okay. My point is, when you look at those blossoms, you know that you're not seeing those blossoms. All those 90 blossoms of those photos that were submitted in the spring, they're gone. So those are actually blossoms from long day plants. So those are plants that are proceeding as the day length gets longer. They send out their flowers. And then June comes along and the days start getting shorter. So right now in August, we're seeing things like Joe Pye, black-eyed Susan. Those are plants that are short day plants. They're perceiving more lateral sun rays, longer shadows, and that signals them then to set up their colors. Okay, here my question was, the moth. That's also a spring wildflower, so it's a long day plant. That's a May apple, and the May apples blossom. They're a beautiful ground cover. They're under the tree, just as the leaves start to come out. You can see them. You see it? Yeah. So right there is a white moth down in the corner. And that white moth is a night pollinator. And the May apple's white flower is bright enough at night that the moth can find it. And then during the day, the moth will shelter and hide in the May apple blossom. Okay. See, you probably don't know this, even if you have May apples. But go out at night. Now, there's very little known about night pollinators because nobody goes out at night to see them pollinate. But the point is, put those spring wildflowers under your canopy. And then this time of year, make sure that you have things that are blooming right now too. And these are the short day plants. And when we think about short day plants, actually what the plant perceives is a very long night. And we have a problem in sky pollution. So in the city, you really don't see the stars. I don't know if you've noticed that. We're so lucky here in this region because in a night where there's a new moon, not too much bright moon out, we can still see the stars out of here. And that's because we have dark skies. And in the United States, dark skies are rare. Can you see where we are in that photograph of a map? This map is from a website called Light Pollution Map.html. And they take real data from satellites to figure out how bright different parts of the country are. Here's Knoxville, bright red and orange. Here's Asheville, red to orange. Here's Greenville. And right here, here's where we are. This is our plateau. We are so lucky we still have dark skies. So all of those short day plants, if you flash a light in the middle of the night, those plants are going to be confused. They're not going to know that it's a short day, that this is time for them to blossom. So we can grow things here, and I consider this the spirit of our mountain, that we can't grow in cities. In cities, they might need to have some of the cultivars that you live in here. But the light pollution levels are changing. I looked up light pollution levels for our house. We live in the Whisper Lake neighborhood, and they were kind of low, and they are going up right now. We're building new houses. Some of my neighbors have really bright lights. We have blue ghost fireflies at the end of May and early June. You know about the blue ghost fireflies? You have to have it really dark for the blue ghost fireflies to come out and to be able to see them. As a matter of fact, you have to go out during the new moon. You can't go out during the full moon. So we go out and we talk to our neighbors and we say, hey, the blue ghosts are coming out this week. Would you mind just turning off your lights? And all the neighbors are happy to comply. But this is going to become more and more of a problem as houses put these bright LEDs. Well, look what Cashiers did. Down in the corner is the graph of about the last 15 years. Cashiers had a light problem and they passed some ordinance, or they talked to the business owners. Arielle knows more about this than I do. And they really pulled down the skylight and decreased the amount of brightness that was coming from Cashiers. If you go to the new Village Ramble, they put lights in there, but they're lighting not the sky. They're shining the light on the ground. And actually, people say, well, I need lights for safety. Well, if you have a big glaring light on your driveway, that's not safe because it's so bright that you can't actually see what's up the driveway or what's off in the forest. Whereas if you have these lights that focus on the ground, here's the best one, especially if it's a low light focusing on the ground, then it lights up the ground and your eyes are accustomed to the dark, but you can still see it in the dark. So I think that good lights are actually safer than the bright lights that we need to be considering that are interfering with the timing of not just the plants and the blossoming of short-lived plants, but also the pollinators. The moths will go to the light instead of the white flower. Or honeybees will even go to lights at night. They won't find their way home. Okay, so that was my light story. And I think, isn't that fascinating how plants can perceive not just what they use for photosynthesis, but perceive other lights and make decisions about when it's time to log them based on what you perceive. So now I want to shift to a news story. Here's the story of a chickadee. Have you seen that kind of a bird? We have chickadees around here. Can anyone see what it's doing here? It's actually got a spider in its mouth. Okay. So if you don't like spiders in the garden, you want to have chickadees because the chickadees are catching spiders and using that to feed their offspring. Well, a guy that we know a lot about, Doug Tallamy, he's a biology professor. Actually, he's an entomologist at University of Delaware. He's also professor emeritus at the moment. He's coming, by the way, in November to give a talk. He published this work in 2018 based on a neighborhood nest watch citizen science study. So they asked people to look at their yards and judge what portion of their plants are native plants. So here in the graph along the x-axis, if you're off to the right, that means you have a lot of native plants. If you're here to the left, 0% to 25%. That means you have a lot of non-native. That means you have a lot of native plants. Sorry, I think I did it back. More non-native plants are to the right. More native plants to the left. And then they had the citizens who were in the Nest Watch study look at the abundance of spiders and caterpillars and just count how many spiders do you find, how many caterpillars are you finding. And what they found was that, first of all, there were always more, spiders than caterpillars. Might be hard to see this, so the spiders are in triangles and the caterpillars are in sequence. But to make it easier for you, they drew a trend line through the numbers. And you can see that although there are always more spiders than caterpillars, for both of these food sources of chickadees, the more native plants you have, the more there are, the more abundant the spiders and caterpillars are. To the point where if you had, 80% of your property in non-native plants, there almost weren't any spiders or caterpillars anymore. And so the poor chickadees, this was a photograph by Doug Tallamy, where he actually caught the chickadee with the caterpillar in its mouth, ready to feed the baby. Here's a fledged in this corner, just a day out of the nest. That little thing. So in order to get those birds to the point they're so chubby and can keep themselves warm, they have to eat a lot. And I think one study Doug did even shows like how many. It's something like 1,000 caterpillars. I mean, it's just so many. And then here's my picture of a chickadee off to the right, taken by the bird buddy. The chickadee is an insectivorous bird. It doesn't really eat food. But for whatever reason, it came up to my bird buddy and posed for a picture. And here to the left, we have chickadee, it's the Carolina chickadee, which is actually from lower altitudes and warmer climates. So we're pretty lucky here because we have the black-capped chickadee that they have up in Washington, D.C., where it's cold. We have the Carolina chickadee that's from lower altitudes, and they all come together here on the Cashiers Plateau, and they interbreed, and we have the whole range from Carolina to black-cap. Got some really precious birds around here, and I'm so glad he did this study so we can figure out what we need to do to keep our chickadee population healthy. And here's what we need to do. The Audubon Society has a native plant website where you can go and you can put in your zip code, and it will suggest to you what type of plants you might add to your garden in order to support and attract the wildlife. And supporting attracting the wildlife means you're supporting the pollinators, which are going to feed the chickens, which are then part of the wildlife. So why would you want to plant something like Allegheny serviceberry? Well, the reason I wanted to plant is because I looked. And increasingly, those plants that are listed on the Audubon Society webpage are for sale by local nurseries, like the garden, where I got mine. There's the picture of blossom in my yard. Really happy. First year I planted that tree. It is really. But here's this is one of those birds. That if we don't provide the kinds of food sources that this great diversity of birds need. And in fact, the Cashiers Highlands Plateau, in other words, the Oconee Bell region, is one of North Carolina's important bird region. We call it an actually important bird. It's almost the only important bird place in North Carolina that has two towns within it, Cashiers and Highlands. All the other important bird places are like off in a swamp somewhere. People have to make an effort and go to do it. But it's only because we have this great diversity of oak forest. We have the hickory, we have hemlocks, we have pine trees, we have such a diversity of forests. And the cold climate so that birds that are normally found farther north can come down and feed around here. So I'm going to talk to you about two more plant examples that I think are worth mentioning. Remember, the pine straw under the canopy is what you see, unless maybe you have a lawn. And I'm wondering, like, why is that? Why not put cardinal flowers under the canopy? Because cardinal flowers are beautifully blossoming in red tubular flowers at the moment. They attract pollinators, especially hummingbirds. Okay. So we had hummingbird feeders, and the bear would climb up and grab the hummingbird feeder, and then you have to go buy another one. Now what we have instead of hummingbird feeders is we have just cardinal flowers all over the place. They'll grow almost in any shade area. And the hummingbirds come to the cardinal flowers, get the nectar, and in the process, they're pollinating with cardinal flowers. So there's an interdependency. So if you see those red flowers and hummingbirds, to me, that's the spirit of a monarch. And anybody who has pine straw under their canopy could easily plant some cardinal and attract some hummingbirds. And here are the other birds that benefit from it. Chickadees, nuthatches, again, the indigo bunting, some of the cardinals, vireos, warblers. So a lot of the songbirds need these flowers that, okay, it's not your manicured, beautiful garden, but it's providing resources that are keeping the birds in our area. And this, by the way, that's the cardinal flower photo from my yard. That's one of them. And one day the deer came along before it bloomed and bit off his buds. Did that ever happen? Okay. A month later, that cardinal flower had made two little branches, and I had twice as many flowers after the deer had bitten off the bud. How often does that happen? So these are flowers that are actually adapted to living right here.
The bar, though, you can tell by the color of the leaves, but they had a Chautauqua Gardens nursery. This is it.
And when it doesn't have the blossom, it's just like a rosette of leaves. It's like a nice ground plant.
They grow all kinds of
It'll tolerate sun too, but if you put it in a place where the sun is too bright, it'll turn kind of yellow and the leaves will get smaller and it'll start dropping. It really wants to be in a wet, partially shaded area. And then finally, I wanted to talk about Joe Pye. You'll see why in a minute. And have you looked along 64 between here and there? You know, the big Joe Pye flowers. They're like 7 to 10 feet tall. And Adam Bigelow thinks we should call this the Joe Pye flower and not the Joe Pye weed. The moment you call it a weed, well, we should be pulling that out. We shouldn't be pulling that out. And here's why. Look at all the birds that benefit from Joe Pye. Okay, now I got to tell you the story about my Joe Pye. So in my yard, I have a bunch of ferns. I didn't plant any Joe Pye weed, but they come up. They just appear. But mine are not the 6-foot version. Mine are like 3-foot version. So it's probably a different species. I'm not really sure. But recently I went out there, and here my question, spot the slug. You see the slug? You probably can't see it. But the slug was up on one of the top leaves, and all of the leaves from there down were gone. That slug climbed up my Joe Pye weed and ate all the leaves off of it. But the flowers are okay. So I'm beginning to think as a biologist, oh, no wonder Joe Pye grows up. That's a long way for a slug to have to climb, right? But it's a good thing. Chickadees eat slugs. And so do all these other birds, the waxwings, the warblers, woodpeckers, wrens, thrushes, a whole diversity, the indigo bunting. Blackbirds and orioles don't eat the slugs. So you don't actually need to use that slug attractive poison stuff on the ground, because slugs are food for turtles, good snakes, and birds like warblers, wrens, chickadees, thrushes, but owls and wild turkeys. So I'm aiming for wild turkeys in my yard. And Joe Pye might help us give you. If there's enough that. Okay, so now my final topic. You saw the Joe Pye was coming up among the ferns. So I have a lot of natural ground cover. Those ferns, they're the typical New York ferns. They just come up here. I also have other kinds of ferns, including a Japanese fern that seems to be taking over. I'm going to try to pull that out. But you know, ground covers are really good. If you have problems with erosion, a ground cover will solve erosion. It will cover the roots of the trees that are exposed around here when it rains and the dirt washes away. You need ground covers to protect that. And these are beautiful pictures of ground covers. This one is a bunch of ferns, probably New York or Eastern ferns. This one is a path up at the Graveyard Fields Trail. It looks like grass, but it's not. It's sedge. So if you go hiking in the forest around here, you'll find all these little sedges that look like beautiful manicured grass, but nobody's mowing that. They just don't grow anymore. So sedges are really great, and you find them in nature. No one has to be taking care of that. And then here, of course, is gallants, and among the gallants, that we also took that picture at Graveyard Fields Trail, were some trilliums. And it wasn't trillium season, but the bright red berries that have seeds were there ready to attract the ants that will then spread out the trilliums among the gallants. And so ground covers are important here and not hard for us to plant and to nurture and to take care of. But here's what we find instead. So when we moved into our house, there was a whole bunch of English ivy, and I thought it was really nice. And one of my native plant friends said, no, you've got to pull that out. She said, you might think you can keep it in its place right now, but you're going to die someday. And if you think about the future, that ivy is going to take over. And sure enough, this is a picture in our neighborhood of a house that burned down, but the ivy is left and it's off into the forest, and to the point that almost no one is going to get rid of it. If you walk the new ramble behind Whiteside Brewery, there's a beautiful green area until you stop and look and realize that whole green is only ivy. I can't wait to get my hands on it and pull out all that ivy and see what shows up there, because all that you're gonna get. So the things to stay away from, and I would stay away from them because they're invasive. Invasive means it's not native. It's easy to establish itself on many different sites. It grows so quickly and it spreads to the point that it covers the habitat and doesn't let anything else in. So stay away from English ivy. One that's even worse to me, yellow archangel. One that I don't have, creeping Charlie, some people call it ground ivy. Another one I have, common periwinkle, and finally Japanese Pachysandra, Japanese spurge. Oh,
Japanese knotweed, also The surge of passion. Not great. Yes. But not to villainize this plant, it usually shows up where there's disturbed soil, and it's just really good for soil. Yeah. What? Another name for it? Smart. I get, yeah.
There is.
Common name.
It's smartweed, not knotweed, but knotweed is a problem.
There is a native.
Oh, is this a native?
No,
It's
this
still
is-
invasive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is invasive.
So it's not weed and,
Yeah, milkweed, this is wrong.
oh, the knots, the joint.
At the
So
moment,
this is why you join the Native Plant Society. because you
Both
have
of these are not great.
uh,
Both of these weeds are not great, yes.
That weed has a right to live. Yes.
There you go.
So I've got some samples, if you're not familiar with these particular ground covers, and you fear you might have some in your yard, I fear you might have some in your yard, because they grow so quickly that the builders put them in. And before you realize, you might want to take that out and put something up. You know, this is cheap. So when I see a house that has ivy or, my lamium, what is it, the yellow archangel, it's like, oh, there was a cheap builder just put cheap stuff in it, and it doesn't look good, and we need to get rid of it. It takes a bit more effort to pull it out, but you can do it. I think I got rid of my ivy in about 2 years. Just pulling it out and then putting it in beautiful. And it's not totally bad. Where the ivy had been pulled out, the ground there was in good shape. So it was easy for me to plant other things in that location.
Sorry to interrupt you. That previous slide had the native ground covers, calyx, et cetera. What can we do to encourage this? Because I have sort of patch calyx, like not let it grow, and I have trillium and the leaf slippers, you know, it's sort of a prolific area, but I'd love to see it expand.
Yeah.
How do we encourage it?
I could probably, so today we talked about light. You have to have the right kind of light. But we could have also talked about water, we could have talked about the soil. The Transylvania County Master Gardeners, maybe my colleagues back here know more about this than I do. They had a real problem at the Silvermont House in Brevard, where they were trying to plant native plants. They finally took a sample, a soil sample, sent it to the state, which is free until November. We've got some boxes back here if you want to pick up some boxes. They found that there was some kind of a fungus. Do you remember what it was?
I don't remember the name of the fungus.
They had to
They
take out
ripped
the
it out,
soil to get
yeah.
rid of this awful fungus. And then kind of start making new soil again. And luckily they have a lot of compost in the project. So that's why you need an Coney Bell chapter, so you can get together with plant nerds and talk about things like that and figure out what that is. So it needs light, it needs the right kind of soil, it needs the right amount of moisture. The right plant for the right place for the right.
And the bottom are just slow growing. The
Yeah.
foliage is slow growing. Very familiar. It's just.
I just wait. Moss, so Moss and Annie came to our last event. And I was telling her, I've been trying to get this moss to cover as a ground cover. Moss is a beautiful ground cover. But in my yard, it's all done up and scrambled, looks like scrambled eggs. Okay, right. And Moss and Annie said, put down netting, that plastic netting against birds, like you put it over a feature. And the moss will go right up through it, and the raccoons won't be able to mess up the moss garden. So those are the kind of things that you hang out with nerds who like this kind of stuff. They'll answer your questions. Goodness. Yeah. Okay, I just want to end with what's behind us, and I won't show you too many pictures because you can't get it. I just want to brag about it and introduce Arielle and Mary Palmer. Because I took this Placemaker Academy course, I think it was during COVID, so the year that we were all home. And it was by Zoom, so it was completely, we met once a week in independent study. And what they helped me is imagine what I would like to be doing outside and how my garden could support that. And you start with a map of your house that you draw to scale. And then you locate the different trees that are in, and you figure out what your slope is, and you look at the light conditions based on orientation. So in our house, the sun comes from this direction. So here, for example, we have a really, really shady corner. You've got to be aware of that before you get your bed. And then explore your gut emotion. Okay, what do you feel when you go out? Like, what really gives you joy in your garden? What are you worried about? What do you hate about it that you want to change? Is there a problem that designing your garden could solve? So we definitely had a problem with some of the drains when there was rainfall. They would fill with weeds, but it was up in a part of our roof that we couldn't climb up and reach. And so that problem of the water coming over, I started thinking, yeah, maybe my garden could solve that problem. And it did. I just put a fountain down there. So now when the rain comes across the gutters, it's putting the water into a fountain, which we enjoy every day. So when I approached buying, you know, you can actually find a dark corner and solve problems with things that people enjoy, like a nice seating area. You don't have to have a lawn there. Thinking of the plants that are already there, we had these oak trees, we had hemlocks, we had shagbark hickories, that's a real resource for the wildlife. Given that there's so many big trees, though, what are you going to do with the garden? Because it's going to be a finishing spot. You have to have a plan. Well, my plan involved putting elderberry along one side because there's been one elderberry that was working fine, and I thought I'm going to make a whole wall of elderberries here. And behind the elderberry is my glucose firefly garden. So that garden, I realized we had the glucose firefly over there where the leaf litter was left. But over here where my lawn was like a desert, no glucose firefly. So I just left part of my yard to have the leaf litter. And now every year, at the end of May or June, we can go out and clean the glucose. We even got some lights with a remote control so we can get out in the yard and then turn on all the lights in the house when it's dark. Those are the kind of things that give me joy. And then an edible garden, I put blueberries behind my beehives. I put blueberries behind our fire pit because when you sit at a fire pit, you kind of want to have a backdrop. You don't want the bears or raccoons sneaking up behind you. And pawpaws and persimmons, there's all sorts of edible plants that you can find responsibly in your garden. So here's my garden about halfway through the implementation of the plan that they helped me come up with. And here's part of the lawn that remains. And I can't tell you how scary it was to mow that lawn, the grass on the slope. That's not fun to have to do that. And so now I'm removing some of that lawn and putting pathways in. So keep in mind that having pathways meander through your yard is really fun. And they don't have to be expensive, just, you know, some bricks to make it zigzag. We call this a shangololo pad because shangololo is the African word for centipede. And so you know how centipede, so we have this like narrow centipede, and in my dreams when the plants grow up, there will be ground cover like sea oats on either side. So you go through the path and be touched by the plants. And we now have safe steps down to the fire pit and safe steps down to my beehives, which are down in this region. So that was pretty important to me to be able to safely get around my garden and then to plan things to plant beside it. So overall, the goal is to have your homegrown national park where you feel the spirit of the place that you're going to enjoy, and plants compete with each other. They interact with things. If it doesn't work out, don't worry. The whole plan is to make you happy. And I want to just point out, Arielle came over the other day and she took this photograph of hummingbirds on my lobelia. And I had my hummingbird buddy here, and they come and sit on the bird buddy and let us take their picture. And I've got like 3 different hummingbirds. We've named them now on the bird buddy. And here, there's actually an oak tree close to our house. And I don't think you can see it, but one day we look at this tree and branches are being broken off and tossed on our deck. Okay. So we look at that tree and what's going on? Is the tree falling apart? Here's what it was. We couldn't see the bear when he was up in the tree, but we could see the bear coming down.
My point is, you might, if you have a planned garden, you might not want that oak tree quite that close to your house. Maybe you want it like way back in the garden. You see, there's just there.
There's one.
Oh my God, it's a huge one.
Stay away from the spirit of mountain garden.
So notice how the oak trees are way over there.
Good idea.
And if you need to, you can put fruit trees, but put an electric fence around it to keep the bears off of your fruit trees up by your house. That's very good. These are big boys.
Usually the males are on
Okay, I heard someone say that is wild.
there over there. No, they're not scared at all.
Keep watching, that is incredible. Just to reiterate, like, why we're into native plants, like, I love cardinal flower, it's beautiful, but there's like other reasons. Number one is, when you're making a garden, y'all came here and found out about mountain gardens. Like, you don't want it to look like a Texas garden or a Florida garden. There's a reason we're here. Like, these mountains are literally older than bones, okay? Like, Southern Appalachia is a magnificent ecological jewel. You don't have to make it look like something else. Make it look like what it is, and like, artistically, from a design perspective, that's what you want anyways, so use native plants. Secondly, like, they're easy. They're low maintenance. Like, I'm a lazy gardener, y'all. I am not here for the plants that require my full attention. I select for neglect, okay? And I like native plants because you can just plant them and they survive. They need a little bit of help to get established, like we all do, but then they're good. They're good. And then the third reason is, like, I think a lot of times people think that, you know, environmentalists or tree huggers, as we're sometimes called, are just like obsessed with nature just because it's nature, but they don't realize, like, we're selfish. When we talk about sustainability, we're talking about the sustainability of the human race, y'all. Like, Lobelia cardinalis was around before we were here, and it's gonna be around after we're gone. What we're talking about, and I'm not trying to be alarmist, but we are seeing a serious breakdown in the very fabric of nature that we are dependent on and interconnected with, the web of life. And we cannot go to Mars and solve our way out of that. I'm so sorry. Insects are declining in ways we've seen like never before. And you used to drive around here when you were kids, maybe. You get all kind of insects on your windshields, right? You had to clean them off at the gas station. That doesn't happen anymore. That's a problem. That's a problem because what requires insects? And I eat it every day. Food. Food. You know, you can't grow everything hydroponically in a lab. You need the interconnected web of life to grow food. And so we're like trying to increase these insect and bird populations, not because I'm just obsessed with birds, because I want to eat, y'all. I want to eat, okay? I want to have a viable world to live in for my children and for my grandchildren. Amen. And gardening is a way that we can do that joyfully and creatively. Mary Palmer taught me that, like, we've each got this little puzzle piece in our backyard. That's your little place where you get to promote whatever you want. And you might think that that's a tiny little piece of nature, but we've quantified, like in San Francisco, a neighborhood brought back an entire endangered species of swallowtail because they all decided they were going to start planting native plants. So it might seem small, but you have a chance to make an impact in a way that's like joyful and beautiful we're here too. That's why we're here. So I think I have to change. Every single, pretty much every square inch of planet Earth, there's a plant that's figured out how to exist there. So if you just figure out, I'm not offended. If you figure out, first of all, what kind of microclimate is this? Is this high sun? Is this shade? Is this somewhere where bears are going to come all my What's the climate here? Like, we can find low maintenance gardens to figure out what we're planting to work first and not try to make everything look the same. So, yeah, this just shows you've got different spots in your home that have different microclimates. So, let's talk about plants for shade. I'm going to use the bare focal point. Okay. How scared of stinky. Wow. Well, plants for shade. A lot of times you go to the nursery and you're like, oh my gosh, flowers, beautiful. I want all the flowers, but like Britney Spears needs her backup dancers for a reason. You need other things to go with the pretty blooms to make it look like the ecosystem or like nature, beautiful. So ferns. Don't sleep on ferns. You walk into the shade section of the nursery, you're just like, never. Like a plant there, not interesting. But they're so important to visually plant design, and we have so many cool native ferns here, and they don't need to do anything. This is royal fern. It gets kind of big and bushier, and you can see the foliage is. This is Christmas fern. It's called Christmas ferns, I've heard, for a couple different reasons. One is because it's around in Christmas. It's an evergreen plant, which is amazing. When we're talking about planting design, if you can make something that looks beautiful in winter, you've done a good job. So this is something that's around even in winter. It grows in cracks and rock wall. It's so hardy. And another reason I say it's called Christmas fern is this kind of looks like a little stocking little leaf shoot. Next time you go to the nursery, we're going to say hi here. Check out this fern. Cinnamon fern. Don't take all of them because we need them for our projects. This is a beloved native fern. It's got a really pretty, it's these ones here on the left that have this really big, nice shape. This is also a fun little native plant. Indian pink with the red flowers. Maidenhair fern, also a really wonderful native plant. And talking about art elements in garden design, the movement is one of those things. And you've ever seen these when they get big, they just kind of like twist and wind. So, you get color in the shade, which is one of the hardest things about mountain gardening. Everything is so shady and dark. You just want some color. Bleeding Heart is a great native plant. Pretty little pink blossoms that hummingbirds love. Lobelia. This is the video I took over at Nancy's. Again, both of these attract hummingbirds. Throw out your hummingbird feeders. Stop feeding them every week. Just plant plants that attract them and relax and get to enjoy the show. It's wonderful. A plant that's kind of good for that, because no spot is usually full sun or full shade. You kind of need to observe when it's sunny, when it's shady, what that mix is. But we've got a lot of plants here that like to live on that woodland edge. So they like a mixture of sun and shade. It's one of my favorites. Carolina sweet shrub, also known as bubby bush or sweet bets. And you can get these at the nursery. They have beautiful red flowers, kind of a nice waxy rich dark green foliage.
And they smell good.
And they smell good. They smell so good.
That's why it's called Bobby Bush, because when she didn't feel so good, she took the blossoms and stick them in the.
Yes, this is like old Appalachian deodorant. Same with magnolia flowers. There she is, kind of a more shrubby. Joe Pyeweed, you probably see this as you're driving in today along the roadside, so you know it's low maintenance, right? And this goes by another name that I'm trying to make happen. It's Queen of the Meadow, which I think is much more fitting than Joe Pyeweed, which sounds disrespectful. But you can kind of see this planting design. This is one that me and Mary Palmer worked on together. In the back of this is this nice little light purple hedge. And it just, you don't have to do anything to it. It grows right up against the fence. And it's helping the pollinators. It's beautiful. It's perfect for the back of a planting design, like along a fence or the back of a garden bed. Another one of my favorite native plants for garden design is coral honeysuckle. We have a native honeysuckle plant, coral honeysuckle, and this literally is a cleaning-free hummingbird feeder. You don't have to do anything, and it's a vine. We love thinking about how to include vining plants along with ground covers, because in nature there's no empty niches, you know, and when we see a place like that, it's not only sustainable, but it's visually beautiful. Vining plants are so much fun to play with in your garden. And coral honeysuckle is one of those things. And you will see if you plant it along like an arbor or on a fence post and train it up along the bed. It's absolutely beautiful. Love it. It's one of my favorites. There's like 2 summers ago. It's a little arch. We've been starting to recreate these along the ramble because we think this is very much like the pattern language of Cashiers, and we're going to be planting all kinds of cool native plants up all these arches you see in the ramble, including coral honeysuckle. Okay, so let's talk about, just like, don't sleep on ferns, right? Don't sleep on your sedges and your grasses and your rushes. So these. So when you think about a wildflower meadow, which a lot of times you have a sunny area, that's kind of like what we're trying to create. But it's not all flowers. It's mostly like sedges and grasses with a few flowers in there. So to recreate that at home visually, and I mean, I really encourage you to go look up like Piet and Dove, and Adam Woodruff, an American designer, and to get inspiration for this kind of thing, but you can combine, like, this is a cultivar of a native sedge, so you can have like little blue stems combined with things like, this is definitely our star of the hour today, black-eyed Susan, or Rudbeckia. So plants have a scientific name, genus and species. There are tons of different types of species of this plant. So we say Rudbeckia sp. We're not saying specific species, we just say the general Rudbeckia sp, which means fill in the species later. But there's so many different types of black-eyed Susan, Rudbeckia. There's some that are really tall, put it in the back of your garden bed with like Joe Pyeweed. Or there's some that are smaller and more kind of petite, you can put them in the front of a bed, but it's beautiful and it packs a real punch for attracting birds and supporting them. Love it. So, little blue stem, I showed you guys that. Go down the rabbit hole of native grasses and sedges. Here's like an example of some of these native sedges and grasses all together. And this requires like very little maintenance. Once they're established, it doesn't really need irrigation. So this is one of the plants that's in this little mix. Rattlesnake master. And when you're trying to make a beautiful planting design, you're thinking about all of your visual art elements: line, color, texture, and form. And so plants like rattlesnake master have really cool texture. that they're adding to that whole mix. So you can see we've got some different native sedges in the back. And the rattlesnake wild, but it feels of a piece. These are separated by the same interval. So they make like a cute little rhythm. And then you have your Joe Pye lead in the back. Here's another just pretty little rudbeckia. And against those purples, that purple and yellow combo is not just beautiful, it's also biologically attracts pollinators. So this is the last plant I want to talk about today, mountain mint. And there are a ton of different species of mountain mint, just like rudbeckia, Hycanthemum sp. And when it comes to pollinators, there's generalists and there's specialists. So there's plants that only work with a few different pollinators, and then there's plants that work with kind of everybody. Mountain mint is one of those generalists. It supports so many different species. It's deer resistant because it has a minty flavor. You can use it as a tea. It has a wonderful fragrant smell. Yes, this guy. And just combined with other pretty flowers and things, I think it's just wonderful. It has this like also kind of light green thing that it does, combined with other dark greens. And this is, you can kind of see it in. Don't have to do it. Yes. And they're all perennials. And they're perennials. So Nancy was saying, you know, sometimes it is less expensive. It can be more, you have to invest up front to like get your perennials and make a hardscape that makes sense. And then it's extremely cost effective because, you know, this client, we're going to go in next spring and add a few things, but those black-eyed Susans are going to spread on their own. It's really very simple to maintain. So I am going to go ahead and open up the floor to questions. Mary Palmer can also chime in with her answers too. Yeah, any questions?
When did Joe Pye be transplanted?
When can it be transplanted? Okay, transplanting anything when it's really hot out is just like hard. You know, I don't want to be having to travel a lot in the heat. So fall, you know, mid-September, later September is like a better time to be transplanting stuff. Or early spring. But before fall is better because think about the life cycle of a plant. In springtime, it's putting all this energy up above the ground. And then in winter, it's getting ready to put all that energy below ground. So if it's been putting all that energy below ground all winter and then you're digging it up in spring, it's kind of like, oh man, it's better to get it before it's putting down roots in the winter, but when it's not too hot. Yeah.
But being a plant abuser, we plant many times. It's best to cut back the top so they don't have to produce so much energy to feed the wilted foliage. And these things are tough as nails, especially you can run it over, you know, the car and live. So, but I love what you've been showing them with this. These are a great starter set if you haven't been doing native plants. But Arielle's sharing not only the plants, but the uses in a garden, so the design aspect.
Questions? Yes?
When's the right time to cut back things?
The right time to, well, it depends on the type of plant. So in general, you don't want to do it while it's putting out all that energy, you know, high summer. You tend to want to do it in the winter, like November, when it's putting more energy into its roots. But if you're trying to prevent something from getting super tall, say it's something herbaceous like Joe Pye weed or something like that, when it's just starting to get a little bit of vegetation in the spring, you can chop it down a little bit, but don't kill it, and then that'll keep it from getting too tall. I know some native planting designers that are playing with that, but test it out. Yeah.